Good afternoon, Greg.
Hi, Keith. How are you today? It's good to
It
see your
feels like
smiling face.
Thank you. It feels like Groundhog Day. Hello, Greg. Hello. uh, I so look forward to this every week. uh, it's
Me
funny.
too.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. There was a
Yeah.
big delay on that. So,
That wasn't meant to be.
it's funny. I've always enjoyed like shooting the shit with a friend. Talking about things that this commonality. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, we both like business, we both like sports. There's always something to talk about. And so it's good. I think that's one of the reasons we both enjoy this is because there is commonality in the things that we're doing both apart and together, and it makes for good conversation.
And it's interesting because it's commonality, but and yet we still have our unique perspectives on things. Because I think you would agree we don't necessarily see things the same way.
Of
And
course
yet,
not.
whether it's working together in business or whether it's doing this weekly biz talk, we find ways to collaborate and discuss our differences and where we agree, because there's a lot of things we do agree on.
Yeah, and it's actually more interesting when you don't agree on everything. I mean, that there's
I,
some way
I
for somebody else. Yeah, I agree with Greg, what Greg's saying, or I agree with Keith. And it's like, oh, I don't agree with either of them. It's like, no, this is the way I do it.
well, and I think what's interesting in business is as you've pointed out in the past, there's very few things that are right and wrong answers. They're all degrees. There's all what's the best decision based on what I know today. What's the right thing to do based on my level of risk? What's the right thing to do? So it's all things that are there's a lot of gray in business. And I think that's why, I think our experience really helps us sort through the gray and understand and help our clients, make better decisions because of that.
Yeah. So, the one thing that I always liked about sales is that it's truly black and white. I either made the sale or I didn't make the sale.
Mhm.
Okay. So it's
Yeah.
like, there's no like, well, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. No, you didn't or you did. Okay. So it's very definitive. And
So
what I
what's interesting about that is that's why I liked finance and accounting, because I always thought it was relatively black and white. And the more I got into it, the more I realized it was not as black and white as I thought it was. But you do get down, when you're looking at financial statements, yes, there can be some things in there that are, you know, a little bit gray, but they tell a story. Right? You look at an income statement and you know whether your business is making money or not making money. You look in the checkbook and you know whether you're, swimming in cash or things are not good. So those indicators, I think, are really critical to keep an eye on, keep a close eye on.
so the black and white of, I mean, the numbers are the numbers. So you basically say, okay, I
Yes.
have this many, credits, this many debits. But what went into the credits and what went into the debits? That's where the
Well, I always think it's like peeling back an onion, right? An income statement might give you a starting point, but there's a lot of work to do to determine and understand, why is my business performing the way it is? Um, we've talked about this before, right? You start looking at comparing to last year or comparing to last quarter or comparing to a budget, whatever it is you're doing comparisons to, right? I think that's important to do. And I don't think companies should get caught up in, uh, paralysis by analysis. But you need to know your numbers. You need to know how your business is doing, and you need to know that pretty much every day. You need to know that.
yeah. So and again, because that's not my area of expertise. I'm very capable of understanding, all the
Mhm.
financial aspects of running a business. But the last thing I ever wanted to do was sit there and be a bean counter. It's like, well, my inventory is too high, my sales are too low. Now, I pretty much, looked at the numbers and compared.
Yeah, and I think you may not have been somebody who wanted to, deal with the numbers, but I can tell when we talk, Keith, you understand the numbers. You know what it means from a sales perspective. You understand if you're discounting something, what that means to your bottom line. And so you may not know how to put the numbers together, but I have a really good feeling that you get the numbers when they're put in front of you. You understand what they're telling you, and that they're telling you a story, and they're telling you they're driving you towards making some decisions.
Early in business, you know, although logically I understood it, but I really didn't have the patience to sit there and, I wanted what I wanted, and I wanted to just focus on building sales,
Yeah, you've
Let
told that story before about starting your second store,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
There
that
probably
was the
wasn't a lot of probably wasn't a lot of support in the numbers for starting the second store, and yet you felt it was the right thing to do for your business.
well, well, that's another interesting question of whether I believe whether it was right for my business. I believed it was more right for me. It really wasn't. I mean, I look back 40 years ago, so of course I could say, what was I thinking? It's like losing money in store one, I'm opening store two. What was on my mind? But there's a whole bunch of psychology that goes into that, and my own drive for success.
Mhm.
Okay, made me believe I'm young, I have no kids. If I don't really go for it now, when will I go for it? But I didn't have real mentorship, and I'm not even sure that I would have really allowed myself to listen to a mentor. So I was like a bull in a china closet. I just wanted to go, go, go.
Well, we've talked about that in our coaching businesses, right? That there are business owners who are not really right for coaching. And you probably wouldn't have been at that
No,
time
absolutely
period,
not.
right? Um, Coaching is something, from a business owner standpoint, you've got to be open to. We've talked about this before, but you've got to, you got to allow yourself to be vulnerable. You got to allow yourself to have somebody be critical of your business. A lot of times that's difficult for a business owner to hear. And because of that, they'll get defensive, and the coaching just doesn't go anywhere, because as soon as somebody puts up a wall or gets defensive, it's kind of the end of the discussion.
Yeah, so you know, the term I love to use, you can't teach experience. So would you hire, a 30-year-old coach when you're in your 60s? He or she would have had to have had, started at like 18 and built a huge business to get the kind of respect that you'd say, oh, this is a person that I want to listen to.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I think it kind of begs the question, like, could a young millennial be a good business coach? Because clearly one of the things you and I offer is our experience that we've been through. And somebody who's 30 has not had the same experiences, you and I have had. Now, by itself, it doesn't mean they can't be a good coach, because there's other qualities of coaching that I think are really critical. Being a good listener, being creative, helping somebody see alternatives. You don't run into a lot of 30-year-old coaches and consultants. But they're out there, and
I'm sure there are, and they're very rare, because you're talking about people that have, experienced things at such a young age in terms of success, but I still don't know that they have the missing ingredient, which that missing ingredient is very important, because I hear and I see and I listen very differently now than I did,
Yeah.
30 years ago. So
Yeah.
I just, you pick up on things as a coach. And that's why, when people get done like in sports in their major league career, they rarely go right into coaching or managing. There may be an assistant and things like that, if that's what they want their future to be. But they're really not ready, is that they've seen everything from a player's perspective. In our case, from a, whether it's lifetime employee or as a C-suite, or working in another type of business, or even owning a business. I'm a totally different person than I was, 30 years ago. So there's so much that we have to offer because of our experience that you can't teach. And I think that's.
I agree with that. It's the reason I became a coach, is because I started looking back at my work career and really started to evaluate my background, and just said, boy, I've seen a lot, and I've been in a lot of situations. I haven't been in every situation, but I've been through a lot, and I felt like that was experience that could be very beneficial to a business owner, young or old.
Yeah, I see that, in clients that I'm coaching, and one of them is young. Hold on one second. Yeah, so his viewpoint is very much of a young person. His thought process is not mature. And I don't mean it in like an immature way.
Yeah.
It's really more of the lack of experience is so obvious when he shows me something that he's working on, and I'll say, but what if you do it this way? Or I think that's going to be a problem, is your communication. Okay, it doesn't sound like you're putting yourself out there that you have experience. You sound very inexperienced.
Yeah,
underdeveloped
might be a good word to use, right?
What's that?
Some underdeveloped, right, or undeveloped. Somebody who
Yes.
just hasn't been kind of through the experiences that you have been, that I've been through. Yeah, it makes a difference. I mean, I think it's what led me to do what I'm doing now, is the fact that I felt like I've seen a lot, and that's information I can share with clients and help them avoid some of the mistakes either that I made or that I've seen companies make over the years.
So
hindsight's 2020, right? And not that not that situations are the same, but I've seen similarities today that I saw 10, 20, 30 years ago. And there's value in that. There's value in those experiences, and thinking back to how they panned out, good, bad, indifferent, and then sharing that with clients today.
Think about it, experience is a database of information, okay, that you can draw upon. Now, if your database is very small, which it will be early in your career, you don't have as much to draw upon. We
Right.
sit and talk to people, not only have we been in the business world for a very long time, but we've been married, we have kids, we've raised children, we've been in many different types of situations and scenarios that you can basically look back on and say, okay, I remember when something similar happened. You're not sitting there going, well, no, it's just there. It's like it like just comes up. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that. I was dealing with this client, and whatever, happened.
Yeah.
So it's
I
drawing
like
upon that experience.
I like your analogy to the data points because we all like having more data from which to make decisions from. And you and I have a lot of data points because we've experienced a lot where like you're saying, somebody who's only been doing this for a few years doesn't have the same number of data points. It doesn't mean they can't make a good decision. It just means it's going to be based off of a lot less experience and a lot less data points.
Again, failure is the best teacher. So it's like the advice we give could very well be of something that happened that didn't work out.
Yeah, well,
Okay,
absolutely. Yeah.
Do not do that. Okay, and then you become a storyteller. When
Yeah.
I was your age, you sound like old people, but when I was your age, I made a decision. Here's what happened.
Well, it's funny how I'll be in situations now where I'll be talking to somebody and they'll say something or bring something up, and that triggers something in my mind, thinking back 5 years ago, 15 years ago, 25 years ago. Say, oh, I remember it's not something I would have thought of, except they kind of triggered the thought because of something they said or the situation they described. I'm like, oh yeah, I've been there. I've seen that. Ooh.
Hence, you can't teach experience.
Right.
It just
Yeah.
experience comes with time, and I don't want to even say we get smarter just because you just seem smarter because you happen to know, and again, using sports as an analogy, when you strike out on a curveball from a pitcher and he threw that pitch on a 3-2 count, or he always throws it on a 2-1 count, it's in your database. Okay.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean he change up on you and do something different, but people have tendencies. Okay. And those tendencies become habits. So there's going to be a tendency to do something the same way every time. So
yeah, and you're right. I don't know if we've gotten smarter over the years, but I certainly feel like we've developed wisdom and humility. And I think that makes a big difference in the decision-making process. I think you've described yourself when you were young. You were probably not the most humble person. You probably thought you knew the right thing to do at the right time, and nobody was going to tell you differently.
No question about it.
And now I can tell, now working with you, I can see a lot of thought going into your discussions with our clients, where you're just a lot more thoughtful about your approach, and you very rarely, I don't know that I've ever heard you tell a client, you need to do this or you need to do that. You're much more thoughtful about giving them advice as opposed to trying to push a decision upon them because you think it's the right thing to do. Not that you wouldn't guide them towards what you think is the right thing to do, but that's a lot different. Guiding somebody towards the right decision is a lot different than telling them what to do.
Well, it's a very interesting point because, part of what I learned in sales is that you really want someone to sell themselves. Okay. If have to sell them, that's sort of almost like a manipulation, as opposed to them, giving them the information they need to make the decision. Okay, giving them the pluses, the minuses, showing the person, the client, whatever you're doing, and telling them is what's best for them, not selling them what you want to sell them, selling them what they need,
Mhm.
And it's not to say that I didn't have in my career times that I sold what I wanted to sell, whether it was because, this inventory that I need to move, so let me push this inventory. I wasn't selling something that was bad, but again, this is part of business. You're making business decisions, not that it's in it's still thinking of the client, but I could sell them this, or I could sell them this. Okay, both of them work, but I want to sell this today because I want to move it out,
Yeah.
That
Well,
happens in business.
a lot of companies offer incentives to buy,
Right.
right? They
Correct.
might offer incentives at certain times of the year. We just had the Minnesota State Fair here. Every business in town has a state fair incentive, right? Some kind of a discount, so that is not unusual, and I think it's actually good business, right? As long as the incentive is the right incentive. And like you said, you were probably trying to reduce certain inventory. You maybe, automobile dealers, right? They're always offering incentives. And this, especially this time of year, right? Because the next year's lineup is going to come out. And they don't want to have a ton of old inventory. They want new inventory on hand. So you see all sorts of incentives from car dealers between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, it's funny, when my first job in the eyeglass business, I was like the closer, my bosses would tell me, go out and make a sale. But occasionally they say, I want you to sell that frame. And I was going to sell that frame no matter what. By the way, if anyone doesn't know what a frame is, the eyeglass frame.
Yeah.
So I was always good at sales. So, and it's been a very roundabout way of getting to what discussion is that we talked about earlier, which is, I use the term, take what the traffic bears. Okay. And this has a lot to do with being successful in business, being successful in sales and business. More often than not, when a sale is lost, the reasons for that not happening is, one, you either didn't have what the client needed, or you were stuck in your own fixed position about what you needed to sell. In other words, I need to hit a home run every time, which means I'm going to sell the most expensive thing with all the bells and whistles, and that's it. And if I don't sell that, I'm selling nothing. Yeah, I never took that position. One of the reasons I was successful in selling was because I always wanted to make a big sale, but I wasn't letting somebody walk out the door without, making a purchase if I could help it. I mean,
Sure.
You lose a
You're
sale.
you're talking about a B2C situation, right? Business to consumer. And I think of like B2B situations that I've been in where, when you're talking to a prospective customer, you almost want to start slow, right? Because they don't know you, you don't know them. So let's start with small order. Let's see how we work together. Let's see if our needs your needs are met by what we're providing to you. So I think there's a lot of times where it's like, yeah, you'd like to get that big order, but and a lot of times an organization is better off sort of stepping into the water slowly as opposed to diving in.
So, any sale is a good sale. No sale is not acceptable. And I used to get frustrated because, when I started expanding, I wasn't always in, the main store that which was the flagship. So I would go to another store for a while and I call the store and how's it going? Oh, I can't talk right now. We're very busy. Store's full. Oh, that's good. All excited. An hour later, I call back. So how'd it go? How much business did we do? Oh, no, we really did very little. So now in my mind, if I was there, okay, we wouldn't have done very little. We would have done a lot. So of course I interrogated them, what happened. Well, this one came in, they weren't really ready to buy yet. That was like that killed. What do you mean they weren't ready to buy? So my patience, was not very good 35 years ago. So, I get frustrated, but this is the price you pay when you expand. You can't be in every location, all the time. But that's more my failure because back then where I blamed the people, now I look at it, well, obviously I didn't train them well enough to really understand how do you deal with these different scenarios, okay, where there is pushback. There's a barrier to them saying yes. Was it a price issue? Was that, I don't have any money on me right now. I can't, and that does happen, someone wasn't prepared. They just stopped in because, they were next door shopping and, they said, let me look around. Well, so you show them stuff, they like it, and everything is great. And then you go to close the deal. Well, you know what? I'm gonna have to come back. I don't even have my credit card with me, or I want my husband to see. I mean, all the reasons that they're not unreasonable.
Yeah,
but you
we have.
have to train people.
I was just gonna say, I think we have to realize as business owners, we're gonna get pushback from prospective clients. Right?
Right.
Not everybody's gonna buy immediately. There's gonna be some hesitation. And you and I, we're both consumers. We get that, right? We hesitate sometimes to buy something. We say, I can wait on that, or maybe there's gonna be a better deal that comes along, or we have our own excuses, right? So I think, the one thing I've really learned from you is as you've been mentoring me on sales is, hey, how do you overcome some of those things, right? How do you overcome those barriers to closing a sale, right? And again, not in a way that leaves that person feeling like they've been, really treated poorly, or berated or forced into, doing business with you. Not that you can do that, but we've been in situations where, it's felt like that, right? And that's just not going to be, especially in our situations, that's just not going to lead to a good working relationship.
If you make a sale through some method of pressure, where you really push somebody to do something, even if they don't cancel, and quite often people will just, but they have buyer's remorse. They go home and go, I really wasn't really ready to buy, but I felt pressured and I said yes. And it usually winds up backfiring. You wind up with a return or cancellation, or nothing really good comes from that. So this really and this is part of coaching, is that you don't know at 30 what you know at 60. Okay. And you don't have the same mentality when you're young as when you get older. So where I was mature enough at 30 to understand the value of developing the relationship, like right away, because I had the kind of personality I was, I enjoyed people enjoyed me, I was fun, it was nice my stores, especially the ones that I was in, were managed in a certain way that people just wanted to come back. They wanted to refer people. But now my what I learned through the years is that there's a strategy to selling that's really starts with not just the initial relationship start and the build, but it's the education part. It's really knowing your products, being able to find out through proper questions and answers what the client's really looking for.
Yeah. Well, and go back to what you said a few minutes ago about sort of, kind of taking what's given to you, or realizing that, hey, not every sale, not every transaction is going to be a home run, but that doesn't mean it still can't be successful. That maybe starting out with a small sale is actually a better thing to do from the business standpoint. You think of a manufacturing company, if you take a big order and you're not prepared for it, you're going to have disaster on your hands, right? You're not going to supply the product on time. You're not going to provide the quality. I mean, you take a big, you bring on a big client who has big needs all of a sudden, and you may not be staffed for that. So taking smaller incremental orders might be the better thing to do for the business as a whole.
So it's really, I'm thinking back to my early process versus today's process. And although there are a lot of similarities, there are a lot of differences, where I was much more of a aggressive salesperson, make the sale at all costs. I really believe, especially in today's world where there's very little personal connection anymore. I mean, you walk into, other than like a fine restaurant, most stores you walk into is a bunch of kids. Nobody even says, nobody asks you like, hi, how are you? How can I help you? It's like unheard of, I would get so upset if I didn't see a client or a customer, not be greeted properly by my staff.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the most important thing is that initial, communication that you have with somebody.
Right.
So that you're basically selling from the second they say hello.
Yeah, especially in a business like you're talking about, where there really is a high level of service, and people don't just come in and make a transaction when they bought glasses. I mean, it was a process, right? And they wanted to see a lot of, I'm sure they wanted to see a lot of different styles. They were, price was an issue, but also what's the quality? How do they look? What's the experience that they're going through? That's different from a, what I would call like a transactional sale, right? Where you might walk into a retail store, pull some inventory off the shelf and go check out. There isn't a lot of high touch service there. Now you want to make sure you've got the product that the customer is looking for on the shelf, and that it's the quality they expect, at the price they expect. You want to make sure the checkout process is a high satisfaction process, right? You're not standing in line for 15 minutes when you got 2 items. But it's a different type of sale. It's a transactional sale versus what I would say what you described is really more of a relationship sale.
Right. So everything, today where there's a lot of self-service, you go into a store, they don't even have cashiers anymore. It's like you just check yourself out.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So now you're talking about you need to build that automation in a way that is very easy to use. So you're always communicating. It's just today's type of communication is different. You may not hear somebody's voice. You sit there, people, not everybody's comfortable with technology. You sit there, and if you don't make it real simple for somebody who's not comfortable with technology, you've just made a poor customer experience.
Yeah.
Because you didn't, from the top of the organization, they didn't think through what somebody who is, ill prepared to use technology, how are they going to do it? This could be, someone who's in their 80s
Right.
that just never used a smartphone or
Mm.
technology, so it's
It could be somebody who's new to the country, right?
absolutely
It could be an immigrant who's new here, and they've
Or
come
language
from a
barrier.
third world. They've come from a third world country where that technology doesn't exist. And I think that's why you see with retailers, right? They give the options. Yes, you have the option to do self-checkout, but there's still somebody there that you can go to and have them check you out.
Yeah, it's rare. I mean, I know that, I think that Amazon had done some testing with some stores where you can actually go and buy things where you have like either a special card from Amazon that you just, you don't have to speak to anybody. You just go in, you take all your stuff, and basically, as you maybe walk through some part,
it almost gets like scanned as you put it in your cart, is the way I understand it. Yeah. Yeah. So there is no checkout process. Yeah.
Right. There's gonna be no need for humans eventually. So I want to just, before we end, I want to talk about the difference between B2B and B2C,
Sure.
where B2C tends to be smaller in ticket size and immediate, where a B2B sale is not always, but tends to be higher and has a longer cycle of from beginning to end.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of generalities in there, but yeah, I think that's generally true.
Right. But the relationship build is the same from the get-go. It's still doing a needs analysis, understanding, what the client needs, in terms of, was in a B2B, you've either reached out to them or they've reached out to you. Yeah, reaching out to them is a whole animal, because you're trying to find people that actually want what you're selling. But in an inbound situation where someone's shopping, they're looking for some kind of technology, it's always, I don't want to say anything's always, but there's the budgetary issues that a salesperson has to deal with. Like, what are they, budgeting for what they're looking to buy? A lot of times they're way off. They want the Mercedes for the price of a Volkswagen, and it's not, it's just, it can't. So those are the things that, again, my 40 years of experience is what allows me to not only coach all these different scenarios, but actually have experience in all those different things that taught me what I bring to the table today. It's like you looking at a spreadsheet, it's like, it's no big deal. But to somebody who's just started a business, they're looking at a financial statement, they're looking at an income statement, they're looking at a cash flow analysis. It's like, what?
Yeah.
It's like, it's like a foreign language to them.
Sure. What I liked about your discussion there just a minute ago when you were talking about, sometimes the customer has a misunderstanding of expectations and reality. So that salesperson can really help educate that consumer, right? And help them understand that, hey, on this budget, this is what you can get. Right? You're not going to be able to get this for this price. So that education process really comes in, whether it's an automobile, as your example was, or, even in a retail store, right? You think of like sales associates at Home Depot. Right? There's a lot of times where they're educating the prospective customer, and that's what they are. When they walk in the store, they haven't bought anything. They might be buying something for the first time. Maybe they've never bought a riding lawnmower. Maybe they've never bought a gas grill. Maybe they've never bought a leaf blower, you know, so they need some education to understand what their needs are. You know, and that's where I think a good sales associate asks the right questions. They don't just lead them over and say, well, you need to buy this one. They say, no,
No,
what, tell me a little bit about how, yeah, tell me a little bit about how you're going to use this. What, you know, why do you need a riding lawnmower versus just a push mower? Well, I've got 6 acres I'm going to mow. Oh, okay, that makes sense. You know, how often do you mow, right? What's the landscape like? Is it real flat? Or do you have a lot of undulation and hills and, you know, because that's going to make a difference.
no question. So it's, you know, what it comes down to in many of those scenarios is needs versus wants.
Mhm.
Okay, I need a lawnmower. Okay, do I need like a driven, you know, I don't even know what they call it, that you actually do the lawn mowing sitting in the
Like a
is that
riding
what
lawnmower. I mean,
yeah.
yeah,
Now, you may need that if you have 6 acres,
yeah.
but if you have, you know, half an acre, you don't need that. You know, you really don't need anything except a little push mower. But again, there's this desire to, you know, we want something. I want that nice car. I want that bigger house. You know, that's your job as somebody who's the expert, who's selling a product or a service, is to take into account all the different things that show somebody that, you know, you're not just trying to sell them the most expensive thing that's in the store.
Think of that, you know, young person walking in, buying a lawnmower versus somebody in their 70s. And let's say they've got the exact same size property. I might sell a different lawnmower to somebody in their 20s than I would to somebody in their 70s. Because somebody in their 70s maybe can't push a lawnmower like a young person can. So they need self-propelled, they need electric start, they need convenience. Need convenience. Not that they want it, they need it. Now that young person comes in and they may say, well, I want all those bells and whistles too, because I don't want to work hard when I mow my lawn. But again, you learn that by asking a series of questions. Right? What's your budget? Are you okay with a pull start lawnmower? You know, it takes a little more effort, but I can see you're somebody who could do this, right? I'm not going to sell a pull start lawnmower to a single woman who's 70 years old and says, I want to mow my own lawn. She's got different needs than a 25-year-old does.
Right. So again, this is called, you know, proper training. Everything starts at the top. If you're a business owner, if you haven't trained your staff of how to read and react, you read by looking, okay?
Yeah.
You listen, ask questions. But, you know, if a 70-year-old woman, you know, walked into your store, okay, says, I'm here to buy a lawnmower, okay, there are a couple of things that come into my mind right away. This could be a widow, okay, that she basically, you know, she needs something, and maybe her son said, go look at Home Depot, you know, I'll do the mowing, but, you know, I just need you to ask the man there. I can't come, I'm too busy, I work 6 days. And just find out what's the best one, you know, and keep it under this dollar amount. So I'm saying that you can't, if you're not self-aware, okay, there's 2 reasons. Either you were trained poorly growing up, or you're trained poorly by your boss, okay? So either way, it starts at the top, you know, in terms of how we read and react to things, you know. And again, that's why it's frustrating when you go into a store and a bunch of kids, you don't see any managers. If there is one, they're generally in the back, hanging out, they're not up front, reading people, making sure everything's going okay. You got somebody that's just like, hanging out behind the counter, waiting for, hi, can I help you? It's like, oh God. Look, I think we're gonna end today's session because I'm already sounding very old. Okay. It's like thinking back to a different time. I mean, I remember my first jobs. I worked in a dry cleaner, and then I worked in a supermarket. I mean, I think back with such like great feelings about it. I
Yeah,
loved it. Now
yeah.
the kids don't even work. Forget about anything else.
I will just make one
Oh,
last comment because I think
sure.
you're right about, you remember we were talking a few minutes ago about that home run, making that home run sale versus,
Yes.
something that's more realistic or more reasonable. And think about that person coming in to buy a lawnmower and you want to sell them a riding lawnmower. But they may not need a riding lawnmower. They may just need a $400 push lawnmower, not a $3,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 riding lawnmower. And it's important to understand that if you're trying to sell them something that they don't need or want, it's just it's not gonna turn out well. Not gonna turn out well at all. It's really important to understand the needs of your client.
Making a
And
sale today is great, but if you don't think it through, you'll never see that person again.
that's right.
And so you've lost, and I've talked about this in other episodes where you didn't just lose them for today, you lost them forever, and their friends, their family, any potential business that you would receive from doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
instead, they're going to say, you know what? I went to Home Depot. They sold me a lawnmower for $10,000. Okay. They wouldn't let me return it. My son said, you're crazy. What's going, why would you do that? Yeah, I mean, of course, it's a little far-fetched,
You're
the
right.
story, but it's not so far-fetched in the sense that, doing the right thing matters from the get-go.
I totally
That's
agree.
that's how you build a business. That's truly how you build a business.
We've all been sold things we didn't need or we didn't
Yeah,
want.
absolutely.
And not that that doesn't go on us as buyers as well, but
Yes,
it leaves a bad taste in our mouth, and that's just not the way to build a successful business.
yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
All right there, sir. So another week gone.
Yeah.
Well, not it's just the beginning of the week.
Well, but for Biz Talk Weekly, it's another week on.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was
Yes.
a good discussion.
Yes, enjoyed it as usual. So we will look forward to next week. And until then, I'm signing off.